Nottingham has had many sporting heroes: Brian Clough, Peter Taylor and the European Cup winning teams of 79 and 80, Torval and Dean winning the gold medal in Sarajevo back in 1984, and of course more recently in 2008, Rebecca Adlington's 2 golds in Beijing. However, we are here to talk about one of the forgotten heroes, a man whose feats of endurance are remembered only by a few and sadly forgotten by many more. Thomas Blower, the son of a miner, was born in Hyson Green, Nottingham in 1914 and became celebrated for his extraordinary feats of distance swimming. Although it's hard to imagine today, Tom was often seen swimming up and down the Trent opposite the meadows. This was his training ground. Even more hard to imagine was that when he attended Berridge School, he was actually nicknamed Cart Horse because he was so slow in swimming sprints. Speed may not have been his forte, but endurance surely was. He once undertook a 30-hour non-stop marathon at Victoria Baths in Stanton, where he swam a total of 2,664 lengths. In 1935, he became the first non-Lancastrian to win the 10-mile race across Morecambe Bay. The weather was so bad, he was the only person to finish. In 1937, he becomes the world record holder when he swims the English Channel in 13 hours 29 minutes. He beats the old record by 23 minutes. This earned him a nickname Torpedo. During the war years, he served with the Royal Navy in the Second World War and rescues a drowning swimmer, for which he won the Royal Humane Society Medal. In 1947, he became the first man to swim the Northern Irish Sea in a total of 15 hours 26 minutes. He even swam 34 miles in just 16 hours at Bulwell Lido, with a crowd of 2,000 onlookers cheering him on. In 1948, he joined the short list of people to have swum the English Channel both ways. And in 1951, failed an attempt to swim the English Channel both ways non-stop, only stopped by the fog and strong currents. Tom had worked for John Player & Son as a sales rep, and after moving to Dartmouth, he suffered a heart attack in 1955 and died at the age of just 44. His body was returned to Nottingham, and he's buried in a quiet area in Bulwell's Northern Cemetery. 50 years later, Tom's legacy was finally recognised, with Tom Blower Close being unveiled in Wollerton. So please, take a moment and think of Nottingham's greatest forgotten sporting hero, Thomas Torpedo Blower. Although you may have heard of the name Roy Skelton, it's unlikely you'll be able to picture him, or even remember his massive contribution to several generations of children's televisual entertainment. I still find it hard to believe now that as somebody who grew up with the many characters he voiced, no one ever said to me, "Oh, he's from Nottingham, he is." Roy was born in 1931, oldest son of John and Dorothy Skelton, who ran the local sweet shop. They lived on Glapton Road in the Meadows, which is still there, but sadly no plaque saying he lived there. He went to Mundella Grammar School, where, as well as becoming junior flyweight champion at the age of 12, he also started to act. It was during national service he learnt to fence and also ran the theatre club. Through this, he got a scholarship to Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, and then he worked his way through various repertory companies, performing up and down the country. One of his first TV roles was in providing the voices for a children's puppet series called Rubovian Legend, which ran from 1955 to 1963. Between 1967 and 1988, he provided his considerable vocal talents to Doctor Who, voicing numerous Daleks, Cybermen, Crotons, as well as appearing in some other on-screen roles in the series.
Don't you care?
Care? No, why should I care?
Because there are people and they're going to die.
I do not understand you. There are people dying all over your world, yet you do not care about them.
In fact, during his Doctor Who career, he worked with all of the first 7 Doctors in some capacity. In 1973, he took perhaps his most famous role on the children's TV series Rainbow, providing the voices for both the mischievous Sippy and also George the Pink Hippo. He continued to voice this role until the programme ended in 1992, and these 20 years accumulated in nearly 1,000 episodes, during which he would voice both characters together at the same time, even arguing with each other. Skelton's contribution was tremendous. He even wrote 150 episodes of the show himself. And unlike many actors, Skelton remained proud of his achievements and would go on to voice Zippy and George many times after Rainbow ended. In 2002 he recorded a top 20 dance single, It's a Rainbow, providing the voices for George and Zippy as well as a few other rave songs. Zippy and George also made an appearance on The Weakest Link as well as Ashes to Ashes and TV Burp. Skelton was a lifelong Nottingham Forest fan and had an unfulfilled ambition to commentate on a game using Zippy's voice, which would have been amazing. After suffering a stroke, Skelton died at his home in Brighton on the 8th of June 2011 from pneumonia, 2 months shy of his 80th birthday. So the next time you're watching classic Doctor Who, ask yourself, do those Daleks have a Nottingham accent?
Must be destroyed! Exterminate! Exterminate!
If you ask anyone to name a famous Nottingham boxer, you'll generally get two answers. Most recently, Carl the Cobra Froch, the ex-super middleweight champion of the world. Or even new boxing hero Lee Wood. And if they think hard enough, they'll remember the name of Bendigo, bare-fist fighter of the 19th century. The name's still famous throughout Nottingham today. There's a pub, a bar, even a fictional book named after him. But what about the other Nottingham fighter? Bendigo's great rival, and the man who allegedly gives his name to a famous London landmark known the world over. I am of course referring to Ben Caunt of Hucknall, the forgotten fighter, ex-heavyweight champion of all England. Ben Caunt was born in Hucknall Torkard on the 22nd of March 1815, the son of a Newstead Abbey gamekeeper. He grew to stand 6 foot 2 inches tall, weighing in at 18 stone. He was strong and durable, with a deep barrel laugh. Back in those days, there was no Marquis of Queensberry rules. This was proper bare-knuckled fighting known as pugilism. Caunt wasn't a technical fighter by any means, with sledgehammer fists and strong arms that he used to crush his opponents. He was willing and strong, but also slow and clumsy. Little is known of his early career, however we know much about his battles with another local fighter. On the 21st of July 1835, Caunt fought the local hero William Bendigo Thompson over 22 rounds. But Bendigo frustrated him, continually by dropping to his knees each time Caunt tried to squeeze him, this being the indication of the end of a round, and he was disqualified finally for striking Bendigo while he was sitting in his corner. On the 17th of August 1837, Caunt fought and beat William Butler at Stonyford in Derbyshire, and on the 4th of November, Bill Bonnyford at Sunrise Hill. Again on the 3rd of April 1838, Caunt fought Bendigo, and after a gruelling 76 rounds, it was Bendigo this time who was disqualified for going down without being struck. Caunt claimed the heavyweight championship of England, but this was not generally accepted at the time. On the 24th of June of the same year, Caunt was scheduled to fight Bendigo, but the bout was cancelled. And on the 26th of October, Caunt defeated Bill Brassey at 6 Mile Bottom near Cambridge in 101 rounds. Following year, on the 2nd of February 1841, Caunt fought Nick Ward for the heavyweight championship of England, but the crowd forced the referee to disqualify Caunt for an alleged blow striking Ward when he was down. However, Caunt avenged this defeat on the 11th of March of the same year, defeating Ward in 35 rounds at Long Marston to become the heavyweight champion of England. Later that year, Caunt sailed to America to challenge Tom Hyer to a world championship bout, but Hyer never replied, and Caunt returned to England the following year with the American giant Charles Freeman, who he then managed. In 1845, he was challenged for the English heavyweight title by Bendigo, and the third epic fight was on. On the 9th of September, Caunt lost with a disputable decision after 93 rounds, where it was alleged Caunt went down without a blow striking him. Caunt denied the accusation that the title was given to Bendigo, and Caunt finally announced his retirement. Following his retirement, Caunt worked firstly as a farm labourer before becoming landlord of a Coach and Horses pub on St Martin's Lane in London, where his prosperity and wealth grew. Here he would entertain the crowds with his party trick of flattening a pewter tanker with only the fingers of one hand. On Wednesday the 15th of January 1851, in the early hours of the morning while Caunt was away on business, a devastating fire broke out in the pub, destroying the premises and killing 2 of his children along with their maid. Caunt came out of retirement and on the 21st of September 1857 fought Nat Langham, where after a punishing 60 rounds both men were too exhausted to continue and a draw was called. Caunt's wife died in 1859, and still mourning her loss and that of his children previously, his health and general demeanour went downhill, and on the 10th of September 1861 Ben Caunt, still residing in St Martin's Lane, London, died of pneumonia. He was buried outside St Mary Magdalene Church in Hucknall, near the graves of his 2 children and his wife. It is said with some conjecture that the clock tower of the Palace of Westminster is named Big Ben after Ben Caunt. Some will argue against this, but nothing is documented to prove otherwise, and, in the end, why not? St Martin's Lane is only a short walk away, after all. Long before the days of multi-million-pound transfer fees, sponsorship deals and overpaid prima donnas, was Nottingham Forest centre-forward and amateur footballer Tinsley Lindley. Once called an ideal centre-forward, the man didn't even wear the heavy football boots of the day, but preferred walking brogues, claiming that the boots marred his great sprinting speed. Tinsley Lindley was born on the 27th of October 1865 on Clipston Avenue near the Arboretum, the 3rd son of a lace-dresser who later became Lord Mayor of Nottingham. Lindley went to the Nottingham High School where his sporting prowess was recognised, and between 1875 and 1883 he captained the school football team. How good was he? On his debut for Nottingham Forest Reserves on the 17th of February 1882, at the age of just 16 he scored a hat-trick and went on that year to score 85 out of the side's 141 goals. On his debut for the full team against Wolverhampton Wanderers, he bagged 4 goals. To continue his education, however, he left Nottingham Forest and went to Cambridge University, where he played for Cambridge University football team as well as the Corinthians and the Casuals. Whilst at university, he obtained his degree in law, Master of Law and a doctorate as well. In 1888 he returned to Nottingham and resumed playing for Nottingham Forest as an amateur, so his law practice could carry on as well. Being classed as an amateur meant he wasn't tied down to just one club. During the 1889-90 season he also played 3 matches for Notts County, however Notts were fined and deducted 2 points for fielding an unregistered player. In 1891 he also played for Crusaders and Swifts as well as guest playing for Preston North End, where a newspaper article of the time described him as the Prince of centre-forwards. Lindley also represented England between 1886 and 1891, playing 13 times and scoring a total of 14 goals. His talents weren't just confined to football though, and between 1885 and 1893 he also played first-class cricket for Cambridge University and Nottinghamshire. On retiring from football, Lindley practised law on high pavement and also lectured law at Nottingham University, served as a county court judge as well as serving on the Nottingham Forest Committee for several years. During the First World War, Lindley served as Chief Officer of the Nottingham Special Constabulary and as Deputy Director of Nottinghamshire Territorial Association, for which he was awarded the OBE in 1918. On the 31st of March 1940, at the age of 74, Lindley died of pneumonia at his home on 14 Park Terrace, the true gentleman amateur sportsman. Bizarrely, given his status, Lindley was buried in an unmarked grave in Nottingham's Wilford Hill Cemetery. But in 2013, a campaign was launched by Ron Clark to provide a headstone, which was unveiled in March 2014. Lindley was one of those true gifted individuals who excelled in any sport he tried, and is also one of a select few who has played for Nottingham Forest, Notts County at football and Nottinghamshire at cricket. Although Lindley's contribution to Nottingham Forest may be a long distant memory, you can see by the photos that his memorial is visited as a pilgrimage by the many Nottingham Forest fans the world over. And it has to be said, what will Nottingham Forest do for a proven centre forward with Lindley's strike rate today? When you think of great Nottingham writers, the chances are that two names will spring to mind, the first being that of D.H. Lawrence, writer of Lady Chatterley's Lover among others. The second name will almost certainly be that of Alan Sillitoe, whose Arthur Seaton of Saturday Night Sunday Morning and Don't Let the Bastards Grind You Down was made into the classic Albert Finney film in 1961. Sadly, the chances are that Nottingham's other great writer will slip your mind entirely, if you're even aware of him, despite being a Booker Prize winner and having 45 novels published between 1958 and 2010. Stanley Middleton was born on the 1st of August 1919 at 30 Minerva Street in Bulwell, the youngest of 3 children and the son of a railway guard. The family later moved to Broomhill Road. He was educated at High Pavement School and then went on to Nottingham University College, where he read English literature and French. The war years interrupted his education and he served in the Royal Artillery and the Army Education Corps in both England and the Far East. After the war he trained as a teacher, returning to his old school at both Stanley Road and Bestwood, where he taught English and became department head at High Pavement College. He taught there until his retirement in 1981, and whilst there he taught actor Peter Bowles and even appeared as a guest on This Is Your Life in 1980 when Bowles was a subject. Middleton's first novel, A Short Answer, was published in 1958, and he continued to write approximately 1 novel a year until his death. In 1974 his novel Holiday won the Booker Prize. In 1979 Middleton turned down an OBE, feeling that he'd not done enough to deserve it for what he regarded as simply doing his job. In 1998 he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. His 45th novel, Cautious Approach, was completed just before his death. Many of his novels were set in his native Nottingham, although he renamed it Beechnell. There are regional and domestic novels examining the low and middle class marital and family relationships, not the angry young men of Sillitoe or the shock value of Lawrence, and as such he didn't receive a public acclaim like his contemporaries. Middleton remained a local man, regularly playing organ at St Mark's Methodist Church in Bulwell. As a talented painter, he also did the watercolours which were used on the covers of his novels Catalyst and Stanley Middleton at 80. In 1951 he married Margaret Welch and had 2 daughters, Penny and Sarah, and they remained together at their house on Caledon Road in Sherwood until the 25th July 2009, when, after suffering from cancer, Middleton died 1 week before his 90th birthday. Sadly, it's highly unlikely we'll come across his like again. Middleton's books may not be mainstream, however it should be noted that a signed first edition of Holiday is currently listed on eBay at £1,800. Like nearly all of the Nottingham forgotten heroes in previous videos, Frederick Gibson Garton's contribution to society has become a piece of forgotten history. There's no fancy name plaque outside his house, and yet his legacy has spread the world over. It's used by people every day, and there's a very high chance that you have his products in your kitchen cupboards right now. I am of course referring to the world famous HP sauce. Frederick Gibson Garton was born in the village of Costock in 1863 to William and Eliza Garton. The family moved to New Basford, and by 1881 his father was running the Royal Oak Public House whilst Frederick spent time as a grocer's apprentice. It was here that he came up with a magic recipe for his famous sauce, which included garlic, shallots, ground mace, tomato puree, cayenne pepper, ground ginger, raisins, flour and salt, as well as vinegar. By 1891, Frederick, his wife and family were living at 47 to 49 Sandon Street, just up the road from the pub, and where Frederick was running his sauce and pickle factory. In 1895, he registered the name HP Sauce, after finding it being served in a restaurant in the Houses of Parliament. It would be nice to think that HP Sauce could have become the pride of Nottingham, with a massive pickle factory in the heart of Basford. However, it wasn't to be. Money talks even then, and in 1899 Garton fell behind on his payments for vinegar, the key ingredient of his sauce, to the Midland Vinegar Company. I would guess that Edwin Samson Moore, the company's representative, was a good negotiator, and to clear out the outstanding debt of just £150, which doesn't sound like a lot but is the equivalent of £20,000 today, he purchased the rights not just to HP sauce, but to all of Garton's products, which included among them the original Daddy's sauce, and business rights, along with his name as well. The contract also prevented him from trading in any sauces or chutneys in the future. The poor man even had to go to Birmingham and teach them how to make his sauce. The Midland Vinegar Company continued to produce Garton's HP sauce until 1903, when the Garton name was dropped. They eventually became HP Sauces in 1924, and to be fair to them, they did an amazing job of promoting the sauce. And by 2019, 28 million bottles were being consumed every year, particularly on bacon sandwiches. As for Frederick Garton, on the 8th of February 1888 he married Florence Catherine Charles, and over a period of their marriage they had 6 children. Not long after selling his business, he moved to West Bridgford and after initial struggle set up as a grocer and provisions dealer. On the 16th of August 1942, at the age of 80, Frederick Gibson Garton passed away and was buried in Nottingham Rock Cemetery. Frederick's son John remembers in a 1986 interview with the Evening Post that his father never talked about HP sauce and never allowed a bottle into the house. Hardly surprising, I imagine. Experts reckon an original Nottingham Garton's HP sauce bottle would now go for around £100, although the Birmingham varieties probably a lot less, around £10. Nothing lasts forever though, and the HP sauce factory at Aston in the West Midlands was demolished in 2007 as the production was switched to the Netherlands following acquisition by Heinz. It's a shame that the Garton's name and connection with HP sauce is largely forgotten, so the next time you add some HP to your bacon sandwich, think for a moment of Frederick Gibson Garton, without whom your bacon sandwich might not be quite so tasty.
How to get on the wrong side of Frank Bruno.
Frankly, I'm not HP.
How to get on the right side of Frank Bruno. Only one sauce can give all Frank's favourite foods the necessary punch. So in a couple of shakes, he's completely HP.
Having a lovely time. Arthur says the view of the front is quite breathtaking. I feel like a new woman, and Arthur says he does too. I must say, this sea air has certainly given him an appetite. Steak and chips, cheese on toast, veal and ham pie, pasties, cold meat, he's had the lot. All with HP sauce, of course. I always bring the HP. Well, you know how Arthur likes a bit on the side.
HP, you've got to admire their sauce.
HP sauce is a great British sauce. HP sauce is delicious, of course. All sorts of people have found it's the richest taste that's ever passed around.
Formidable.
HP sauce you can use every day. HP sauce is the greatest, you say. It's just right for you. Now there's HP and there's HP Fruity too.
Oh, sensationnel. C'est bon.
It's the richest taste that's ever passed around.
In the previous episodes of Forgotten Heroes, we've looked at sportsmen of the past such as Tom Blower, Ben Caunt and Tinsley Lindley. But I hear you asking, where are the women? Surely there must be some female heroes in Nottingham's past. Well, although Rebecca Adlington is a female hero of modern times, lost in Nottingham's past is another champion female swimmer who around 100 years ago was setting records and winning medals. But sadly the name of Constance Connie Jeans is lost in the past. Constance Jeans was born on the 23rd of April 1899, the 7th daughter of James, a wholesale grocer, and his wife Emma, and she was brought up on Hanley Street in Nottingham, a street that looks very different today to what it would have done about 120 years ago. Constance and her 6 sisters had a keen interest in swimming. Indeed, the map from the turn of the century shows the baths just around the corner from their house. But it was Connie who showed the real talent, and from 1913 she was competing and winning. In 1913 she won the Midland District 100 yards freestyle, which she repeated over the war years, and by 1919 she held all the British records from 150 yards to 500 yards. She also set world records in the 200, 400 and 500 yard races between 1915 and 1919. She won 12 national titles in all and was one of 4 sisters who represented Nottingham Ladies Swimming Club at Portland Baths. Indeed, it was at Portland Baths on the 11th of October 1919 that she twice set an All England best time in the 220 yards freestyle in 3 minutes and 4 seconds, a feat which is commemorated still by a plaque on the wall. During the First World War she was instrumental, along with her sister, on putting on swimming galas and water polo matches to entertain the wounded troops, which often finished with tea at the school, which was opposite the pool. In the Olympic Games of 1920 in Belgium, Connie was entered in several events. She just missed out on a medal in the 100 and 300 metres freestyle, coming 4th. But she secured a silver medal in the 4x100 metres freestyle relay, along with Hilda James, Grace Mackenzie and Charlotte Radcliffe. And in 1924 in Paris, again she just missed out in the 100 metres, coming 4th, but lost out in the 400 metres semi-finals. But again she secured a silver medal in the 4x100 metres freestyle relay, along with Florence Barker, Grace Mackenzie and Iris Tanner. Her achievements were also acknowledged by the Jeans Trophy, which is awarded to the fastest senior swimmer in the 100 metres backstroke at the Swim England National Championships. But she wasn't just a short distance specialist, and in this short video clip we can see her easily beating the competition in a 5-mile distance swim. In 1939, the Jeans family were found living at 5 Winchester Street, Sherwood, now a car park, with Constance being described in the census of that year as doing unpaid domestic duties. As the youngest daughter, she was most likely caring for her father, now in his 80s, who died the following year, as well as 2 of her older sisters at the same address who were teachers. Jeans never married and worked herself as a school teacher at Seeley Infant School and eventually as headmistress of Snentondale Secondary School. Constance Connie Jeans eventually retired to Falmouth and died on the 31st of March 1984, aged 84. In previous videos in this series we've looked at people who've reached a level of fame in their particular field, but as time passed they've been forgotten about. This video is different. The person in question didn't set out to become famous, but raised himself to a level of success unprecedented for somebody in his background. Sometime in early 1766, a small 3-year-old child was taken from his village in Sierra Leone and brought back to England, where he was given as a gift to wealthy businessman Benjamin Molyneux on Molyneux House, Wolverhampton. The Molyneux originally hailed from a small village just outside Nottingham called Taversal and made their money through ironworking and banking. It should be noted that the owning of slaves was effectively made illegal in 1772. However, it wasn't until 1807 that the Slave Trade Abolition Act was passed, and even then the Emancipation Act of 1833 before many slaves were freed, which makes the story of George Africanus all the more extraordinary. This painting by Philip Renagle shows a young George Africanus pictured with his master and the hounds. Upon the death of Benjamin Molyneux in 1772, his son George takes responsibility for the upbringing of a young servant. Although servant, George was educated by the Molyneux and became apprenticed to a brass founder and began to learn the trade. In 1784, at the age of 21, George was released by the Molyneux and sent away to find his way in the world. He chose Nottingham as his new home, presumably because of the Molyneux' connections with the city, and he must have passed through it several times in his lifetime. On the 3rd of August 1788, George married a local girl called Esther Shaw, believed to be white, at St Peter's Church in Nottingham. The marriage licence shows George as being a brass founder. His wife couldn't read or write and had to sign a name simply with a cross. We also know Esther was a fiery lady. In 1838 she was fined for assaulting a sweep, aged 9, with a brush. In 1793 they started an employment agency, the Africanus Register of Servants, operating from their home at 28 Chandler's Lane, which is now known as Victoria Street. At the same time, George would have carried on as a brass founder, and Esther is known to have run a milliner's. In 1816, at the times of the Luddite rebellions, watch and ward groups were formed to patrol the streets and protect people and property from rioting gangs. George's name can be seen on the 1816 register. On the 24th of October 1829, George bought 28 Chandler's Lane and several adjoining properties in Bulcher's Yard for £380, which in today's money is around £42,000. Being a freeholder gave George the ability to vote, something only 1 in 7 men had in this time. Sadly, their married life was full of sadness. Of the 7 children they had together, Elizabeth, Samuel, Sarah, Hannah, Anne, Samuel and George, only 1 lived into full adulthood. Daughter Hannah married a local watch and clockmaker named Samuel Cropper in 1825. However, George was unhappy with the marriage, and for many years Hannah and Samuel lived apart. When George finally passed, his last will and testament had a clause that prevented any monies being left to Hannah and being controlled by her husband. George passed away on the 19th of May 1834, aged 70, and was buried in St Mary's churchyard. Esther ran the business until she finally passed herself on the 12th of May 1853 and was buried next to him. As time passes, gravestones become lost as graveyards grow and change. It was only in 2003, after some extensive research, that the graves were finally located again. The green memorial plaque was erected on the railings of St Mary's churchyard in April 2003, along with a new gravestone. In October 2014, a blue memorial plaque was erected on the side of his former residence. In 2015, a Nottingham Express tram number 234 was unveiled with the name of George Africanus on the front. There's even a short play about his life, and a local beer was named after him. Investigations have traced the family tree of George Africanus, however there's nobody left nowadays bearing the Africanus name. George didn't set out to be a hero. He was born and raised in difficult times, and we know little about his early life and struggles, of which no doubt there were many. Yet he made a success of himself and became respected throughout the city. Some may say this is not the story of a hero, merely of somebody who realised, as many have done before and since, that the road to success is through education and hard work. Of the people throughout the city who've been remembered over time, perhaps George John Scipio Africanus is one of the few who deserve a statue erected to his endurance, his success and his memory. It was on a warm summer evening on the 1st of July 1918 at 10 minutes past 7 that an explosion ripped through the National Shell Filling Factory at Chilwell in Nottingham. A total of 134 workers were killed in the blast. A further 250 were injured. It went down as the largest loss of life from an accidental explosion during World War I. But the incident itself is largely forgotten about by the people of Nottingham. This video will outline the story behind the factory and commemorate those who died there. The First World War had been going for 10 months when a scandal hit the headlines in May 1915. Dubbed the Shell Scandal, the Times and the Daily Mail alleged there were not enough high explosive shells, and many of those that were used were defective. The British Army were even rationed as to how many shells they could fire per day, and there was no way we'd be able to overcome the superior German firepower. The Woolwich Arsenal didn't have the capacity to produce enough ammunition, and there was no plan B. 2 months later on the 20th of August 1915, the Munitions of War Act was passed, which included powers for the government to create national factories to speed up production. Godfrey Chetwynd, 8th Viscount of Chetwynd, was given the job of setting up one of these factories, purely devoted to filling shells with explosive on an industrial scale. Now, he knew nothing about explosive or shells, but he was an industrialist, and he knew how to make things work. He chose Chilwell in Nottingham for his factory due to its proximity to a train line from which a siding could be constructed and was sheltered by surrounding hills. The resultant factory covered 194 acres with over 7,500 workers. And, given that the young and able-bodied men were now fighting on the front line, women were employed to do a lot of the work, their traditional roles in the lace industry reduced due to the war. The factories worked 24/7, with 2 12-hour shifts working 6 till 6. Now, these were pre-health and safety days. The explosive element TNT mixed with amatol was dangerous, and because of their exposure, many of the women's skin turned yellow and their hair green, giving them the nickname of the Canary Girls. It took a number of deaths from toxic jaundice before the lethal effects were understood and protective equipment was issued. But the explosive mixture was dangerous in other ways too. Obviously, it was liable to explode. The factory itself was a massive success, and by September 1916 had already produced 1 million shells. But it was on the 1st of July 1918 the disaster struck. A catastrophic explosion ripped through the factory. 8 tons of TNT detonated. Large parts of a plant were flattened. Properties within a 3-mile radius were damaged, and reportedly the explosion could be heard 30 miles away. 134 workers were killed, 25 of these were women. 250 more workers were injured. This was the biggest loss of human life during the First World War from an accidental explosion. Lottie Martin, who was 19 at the time, records the following in her autobiography, Never Let Anyone Draw the Blinds. Men, women and young people burnt, practically all their clothing burnt, torn and dishevelled, their faces black and charred, some bleeding with limbs torn off, eyes and hair literally gone. Without the timely intervention of works manager Arthur Bristow, who tipped burning TNT from conveyor belt trays and prevented 15 more tons of TNT exploding, the tragedy could have been much, much worse. Within half an hour the fires were under control, repairs were carried out, and the morning shift was able to carry on with their work. Of the 134 who died, only 32 could be identified. The remains of the unidentified workers were buried in mass graves at St Mary's Church at Attenborough. The explosion itself received little press coverage. It could have affected morale. It was only reported as 63 are dead in Midlands factory explosion. The reason for the explosion was never found. There were rumours of sabotage, but neither the police or the final report from the Home Office inquiry was able to confirm this, and in the end, although the reason was never found, it was most likely just a tragic accident. Works manager Arthur Bristow received the Edward Medal for his part in preventing the disaster being worse. 8 men and 4 women also received a British Empire Medal. However, many of the families who suffered directly due to loss of life of loved ones will have received nothing, their lives torn apart by an explosion, but over 100 years later, nobody really knows what caused it. 2 months after the blast, the factory produced a record 275,327 shells in just 1 week. By the end of the war, it had produced more than 19 million shells, half the number of shells fired by the British on the Western Front. A concrete memorial surrounded by shell casings was built on the site where the explosion was thought to have started in 1919. Even now, this is not accessible by the public, being inside the Chetwynd barracks, which was built on the site of a munitions factory. The memorial itself talked more about the quantities of shells produced rather than those who lost their lives, and it was only on the 50th anniversary it was updated with a more touching eulogy. On the 100th anniversary of the disaster, the mass graves at St Mary's Church were renovated. The following are a list of the names of those who died as part of the explosion. Men and women, young and old, and you'll see from the names listed that many family members also perished on that warm summer's night in 1918.